Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Boston College, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us in one more live session of our Jornadas Boston College. I'd like to thank Analia and her team for making this possible today, and I'd like to thank our special guest today, Sergio Mobilia. Welcome, and over to you, Annie.
Thanks, Ivana. Ivana Gambarruta is a school principal, and on behalf of the Foreign Languages Department, I'd like to thank her and the Boston College team for the support during these afternoon live sessions. Sergio is my colleague and my friend, and I am very happy to have him with us today. Sergio, thanks for accepting our invitation. And finally, special thanks to today's host teachers, Christian Colucci, Valeria Karsansky, and Tamara Timoschuk. So Christian, Valeria, and Tamara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. We're welcome to have you this afternoon, and thank you especially to Sergio that has agreed to share his knowledge and his time with all of us. Well, I'm going to introduce Sergio a little bit. He started out as an English teacher graduate. Then, well, he got a Fulbright scholarship, which allowed him to pursue further studies in the United States. And, well, his career took off from that moment on. He has become, an international speaker for different companies. He has developed and built a career in the field of professional skills development, worked in international renowned organizations such as Google, Uber, the British Council. Currently, he works as head of international talent in the international technology industries. And well, he has worked in several countries as well. And well, he's going to share with us the importance of soft skills, which now Christian is going to talk a little bit about. So Christian, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Our students come to school on a daily basis to learn history, geography, foreign languages, among other subjects. In most cases, teachers focus on the academic field. We tend to focus on this, but the question is this enough? Are we giving them the tools that they will need in the future as potential employees? What is it that companies are looking for now? What should candidates do to succeed in a job interview? Or what is it that human resources wants to hear from these candidates? That's why today Sergio will be telling us about the importance of interpersonal skills, which are also known as soft skills, and why our students should start developing these skills at both primary and secondary school. So Sergio, we are all ears.
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Bear with me for 1 second. Share screen. Then you guys are going to tell me if you are able to see my presentation.
Yes.
Yep, we're good.
Yes, definitely.
Good.
Yes.
So thank you very much for the invitation again, Analia and team. Super excited to jump at the opportunity to meet students. This is part of my job that I do on a regular basis, and I really enjoy connecting with people that are, starting to develop as the future professionals of the world. And that's why the title of my presentation today is What are the most highly valued professional skills in 21st century organizations? Getting ready for your future career path. So you know by now, my name is Sergio. I thought I would introduce myself very briefly so that you don't get a feeling that you're talking to a stranger. You'll also get the opportunity to interact with me after the presentation and ask whichever questions you might be pondering about. I am originally from Buenos Aires in Argentina, where I'm currently sitting today, but I actually live in between Europe and Latin America. I've been having this sort of like back and forth life between the two continents for the last few years, at least until COVID hit. I don't know what's going to become of my life moving forward until we get some clarity from the national government. But that's sort of like my personal and work dynamic. I'm very passionate about traveling, and I also like the arts a lot, anything from literature to the audiovisual arts and performing arts. And as Tamara said, I've lived in a few countries around the world, so I've been picking up some language skills. I'm fluent in Spanish, English, French, and Italian, and I can read a few other languages that I do not actually speak, but I can understand. And my educational background is sort of like a hybrid mix between education, foreign languages, sociology, and international relationships. That's how I got into the field of sociology of labor, sociology of work, and that's how I made the transition from education into human resource management. And within human resource management, the closest area to education is what we call talent development. Hope that that gives you a little bit of a background to understand how that career switch happened. That's very common in the business world, people starting on in one field and then moving on to different areas of expertise as they build their careers. So if I had to define today what my job is, I like to say that I work with international talent or with superheroes. By superheroes, I mean people like you and your teachers, people that are very passionate about doing amazing work and to offer new creative ways of doing things to companies. So that's how we define talent. By talent, we mean people that have a lot of potential to add a lot of value to companies. Oops, I think I just clicked the wrong thing. There we go. Apologies for that. So I know you guys have access to some sort of chat function. So I'd like to hear, what are you guys passionate about in general, and see if some of the host teachers can throw a couple of words at me. I'd like to understand what the students listening to this talk care about in terms of their professional life and in terms of their personal lives. See, do we have any incoming contributions?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's just be patient. Meanwhile, Sergio, while the students bring something, when you were 18, which was your passion?
What was my passion?
Yeah.
I think I like languages a lot. That's probably why I got into this field. I was interested in different cultures and trying to understand how different societies work. That's probably what led me later on in life to go into the field of sociology. I liked traveling. I wanted to go and see the world. It's a miracle I didn't go into the area of tourism. And I think those were my top three, probably.
Beautiful, great. Some students have answered. The most voted apparently are art, economy, sports, a little bit of architecture as well. These are the passions of the kids. Soccer, which is part of sports, fashion, technology as well. Wow. Some students like maths, hard to believe, but true.
Yeah.
Soccer, which is part of sports. And physics as well.
All right, all super interesting areas of knowledge that actually are booming today in the world of business. I can think of lots of new emerging jobs around those areas. So we're going to be talking about them in a few moments. So let me tell you what my goals are for today so that you know what to expect out of this conversation. I want this to be an online conversation. My first goal is to help you understand why organizations invest in selecting and hiring top talent. So what's the rationale behind that investment? My second goal is to help you recognize what types of candidates organizations are interested in hiring or getting on board. My third goal is to identify or to help you identify which are the competencies and skills that are most valued by employers these days. And last but not least, I'd like to help you reflect a little bit on how you can start preparing for a brilliant future today. You don't need to wait until the end of your school years or until the end of your university years. For those of you who decide to go into higher education to actually start building your career. You should be starting to think and to start building those careers today as part of your initial secondary education. So In order to cover those topics, I've thought that I would do a presentation for about 20 minutes or so. Let's see how we're doing in timing. And that presentation will be structured in three sections. First section is understanding the workplace. What is it like to work for a business? I think this is probably the first approach for many of you. So I thought giving you this background was going to help you to sort of like situate yourself in the topic of conversation. Second bit is how do businesses align their workforce? And by workforce, we mean the people that work in the company, the employees. Yeah, that's what we call the workforce. It's the group of people working for an organization. And the last bit is how to make that link between your school and your future career. All right, does that sound like a good plan?
Excellent.
After that, I think we're going to have some time for a quick conversation with the teacher hosts, and then we'll open up for chats with the audience. Sorry, Christian, what you were saying? Yeah, we're
no,
good?
Excellent. Yes, I completely agree with you. Yes, excellent.
Nice. Well, your blessing, I'll move on. So let's get starting with understanding the workplace. So when you guys think of an organization, you may be thinking about different things. I remember when I was a kid, just to go back to Valeria's question, is what did I think about an organization? To me, my first sort of like contact with organizations was buildings. So probably when I was in primary school, I thought that an organization was a large, cool building. And I wanted to work in an organization. It looked like it was going to be fun. Little did I know. Now, just to make things simple, I'm going to be sort of like simplifying a lot of the concepts so that I don't lose anyone along the way. Things turn a little bit more complex, but I'd rather just keep it as simple as possible. So an organization is basically a group of people who work towards a common purpose or goal, a common objective. That's the simplest definition of an organization that we can give. And organizations come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. We can think of governments and governmental organizations as one type of them. We can also think about professional bodies like, associations of teachers, associations of lawyers, associations of economists. We can think of organizations as in academia. School is an organization, a university as an organization. And we can think of businesses as well as organizations. So today we're going to be focusing mostly on businesses, companies, if you will, enterprises, but we're also going to be making the connection with academia, because that's probably what most of you are interested in. How do you move smoothly from one universe to the other? And if you look at them, and you start thinking about how they operate on two different logics, but the logics are complementary in some way or another. Schools and universities work on what we call an educational logic. They work around developing the individual, developing a person. Whereas companies in general work around the corporate logic, that is to develop a business. But you can clearly see that there are connections there because both require the development of skills in order to carry out an activity. And that's why we're going to be talking about skills for the 21st century today. Now, here you can see through these pictures why I thought that companies were cool buildings. I wasn't that wrong. But what does an organization do really? So if we think about organizations, we probably need to look at them at three different levels. We need to start looking at why an organization exists. So what's its purpose, or what we call in corporate jargon, the mission? What's the mission of a company? So take, for example, Google. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible and useful. You can see that this mission is quite overarching. It's a bit, it's not vague, but it's quite all-encompassing. It's really hard to pin it down into one action. But all the activities and all the different people working for Google, they all do work in order to contribute towards that mission, which is usually a long-term mission. Let's take Spotify, for example, the online music provider. The mission that Spotify shares with the world is to unlock the potential of human creativity by giving 1 million creative artists the opportunity to live off their art and billions of fans the opportunity to enjoy and be inspired by creators. So you get an idea of what the mission of a company looks like. Now, it gets messier when you're trying to actually implement that mission into day-to-day actions. So the second bit is, how do you actually go about achieving that mission? So what's your strategy or what's your approach as a company? And you need to think about a strategy or an approach a little bit like a game. You know, you need to look at what are the forces out there on the market? Do we have competitors? Are we offering something of value that people will be interested in buying, for example? Are we offering a service that's going to make society better? So what's the playing field in which I am operating? And of course, I'm not going to get into a strategy design that's quite complex, but you get the point. There's no, just to use the same word, there's no point in having a mission if you don't have a strategy to back it up. And then the third bit is what do we offer? What are the activities, what are the products and services that the company is going to put out onto the market? So those are the three big things that we need to think about when we think about what does an organization do. You can think about it in terms of an equation. For those of you who like physics and mathematics in the audience, it's about input and output. Yes, you put something in, you process it in some way, and then you get an outcome on the other end. So again, just to simplify a lot, what we're looking at is a company gets into investment practices, anything from purchasing raw materials and technology to processes and facilities, which are the physical spaces where people work, but most importantly, people. And that's where the skills come in. You put them in a little machine, if you will, you implement or execute the strategy. And what you get on the other end is typically three kinds of products. You get the offerings, which are services and products. Think of a table, think of software, think of food. That's what you're going to sell or commercialize. You get some sort of reputation. You know that companies work a lot around brands. And when you go to the supermarket or when you buy something, you're always looking at, oh, I want this brand rather than the other one. For a number of reasons. So that's around reputation. And the third bit, of course, is revenue. We're talking about profit-making companies. I'm not talking about not-for-profits, although the logic is quite similar, and you can take away the revenue bit because the sources of funding come from other places. So when you look at that, you see that the activities within a company are quite diverse. And so they need to be aligned to different sorts of components. Yeah. So you've got a marketing component, you have a finance component, you have an engineering component. Sometimes you always have a human resource component because that's where the people come in. You have a business bit, you have what we call procurement, which has to do with purchasing or buying, usually raw materials. You have a facilities or office space team. So you get the idea. That's basically an organization in a nutshell. But it's quite complex. Things are not as easy. So how does an organization work internally in order to make this magic happen? So we said that an organization has a mission, which is basically to assist other people through the products and services that they offer. And we said that in order to design and create those products, we need a collective strategy. That collective strategy actually requires some sort of company structure. Otherwise, if anyone in the company went around doing their own business without any sort of coordination, things would not be able to get accomplished. Now, the easiest way to visualize a company structure is through what we call an organizational chart. This is what an organizational chart may look like. And what an organizational or org chart, usually the word is org chart, does is it represents a hierarchy. And that's a hierarchy in decision making, because as you know, whenever you have a group of people working together towards a goal, you always need to have someone in order to be able to make some decisions so that people don't start fighting into around which direction they want to go into. So At the top of the hierarchy, we have what we call the C-level or the C-suite. Usually you may have heard CEO, Chief Executive Officer, COO, Chief Operating Officer, CLO, Chief Learning Officer, CPO, Chief People Officer. You have a lot of acronyms around that category. Below the C-level, you usually have some sort of VP or Vice President that manages several teams that are in turn led by directors. And below the directors, you typically have some sort of line manager or people manager, all the way down to individual contributors, people that get work done, but they don't really have to manage other people on top. Now, that's what an organizational chart typically looks like. And what it does is it specifies the main functions needed in the business in order to be able to create those products and services. So here's an extreme oversimplification of what a corporate function would look like. Most companies typically have some sort of product department where they design and develop whatever they're going to be selling. Most companies have some sort of sales department where they take the products that were designed and they get marketed and commercialized. And most companies have some sort of G&A function, which is general and admin, which has to do with all the internal support to make sure that processes happen in the right time with the right quality. So you have the three functions, as we mentioned, of investment, generating revenue, or basically how much money you're going to be making, and then internal alignment. Now, of course, they do not operate in a silo. They do not operate independently, each one of them minding their own business. There are lots of interconnections between all those functions in order to ensure the successful delivery of their goods and products. Now, in reality, it looks more like that. There's always some sort of overlap, and there may even be people who work in more than one team because they act as bridges. Or they may work for a specific team, bridging two different teams. That's a typical example of people working in product that link sort of like the sales people with the engineering people. That is the people that create the product with the people that sell the product. So organizations, like I said, are very complex. In fact, new companies usually have some sort of matrixed organization where you sort of like have the organizational chart that I showed at the beginning, but then you can see that there are people working across, yeah, because you may have different lines of products that you're selling, and you need to make sure that you follow one specific product, but across all the cycles from inception all the way to marketing. So far, so good?
Yep. So far, perfect.
Yes. Good. So we were in the functions, and these functions, as you can see, they all contribute together in very intricate ways towards the mission of a company. Now, when you think of a function, you may have one single team, or you may have several teams inside the same function. Take, for example, marketing, the people that usually do all the advertising, if you will, and all the packaging to bring a product to the market. You typically have, if we're talking a very large organization, what we call a CMO, a Chief Marketing Officer. And you may have, for example, some directors leading different internal functions. For example, you may have a brand vice president, you may have a communications VP, and you may have a digital VP. So what you have here is the same function made up of different teams. Now, those teams, of course, are made up of people that have different roles. So, for example, you may have media planners and retail marketers and producers and experts in search. I know these names probably don't mean a lot to a lot of people unless they are already working in marketing. But what it means is that different people sit in different roles in order to deliver different responsibilities. So each role has responsibilities attached to it. And those responsibilities are only made possible if you have skills. You need to have specific skills to be selected to occupy a position or a role in a specific team to contribute to a function towards a company mission. See, it's like a chain. And that's the direct link between the large organization and each one of us working for a company. Each one of us brings in a lot of expertise and a lot of skills in different areas, and together we work towards creating the products and services that a company offers. So in a nutshell, this is what I just described to you. And skills definitely sit at the heart of an organization. With no human skills, there's no organization possible. So you need to think about this, if you will, for those of you who like sports. Some of you said that you were into sports and sports management, I guess. Think of it as a game of soccer or football, where the goal in this case is actually to acquire and to keep customers or clients through some sort of product or service excellence. And in order to achieve that goal, companies need to attract, enlist, and keep the best possible players in the world, which are their employees, or what we call the workforce. And with that, now that you've got a general understanding of what a company is and how a company operates, let's look a little bit into the people, the workforce, and how a company organizes its workforce. So if you think of a company, with everything a company needs to do, there needs to be some sort of distribution of labor. By labor, we mean the chain of production or the work that needs to be done. So think of Amazon. Most of you probably know Amazon or eBay or Mercado Libre, this kind of companies. Most of them usually have some sort of procurement function where we source the materials that we need, either finished products or materials to actually build new products. A manufacturing bit, which has to do with the production. A warehousing or storage function where we can keep those products. And last but not least, some sort of transportation or distribution network. That's what we mean by distribution of labor. Different functions and different teams contribute to different parts of the process. Now, so far so good. What happens when, as a company, we start being very successful, people start recognizing our brand, we become a brand name in the household, and people start buying more and more and more and more. On the one hand, that's amazing because we start making more money, which means we have more resources and we can pay people more, or we can make more investments. But on the other hand, it means that we have a lot more work to do. And remember, companies don't have infinite resources. They have a certain number of people and a certain number of internal resources, such as money or technology, that they need to rely on. So we need to streamline, or we need to, what's another word for streamline? Help me, English teachers. We need to make better use of the resources. Mm-hmm. Yep. In order to make sure that we're more productive with probably the same amount of resources we have, or with less. So there may come a time where we become so successful that literally we don't have enough hands to keep the business going. We really need to bring in more people. Now, that's not so easy. So we need to get into the world of job creation. How are jobs created in a company? There are two different scenarios typically that we can sort of divide this into. The first one is we have our business that is thriving and is growing, and our capacity to produce goods and services is outpaced. Basically, we're getting more demand than what we can supply. In that case, we are in a situation where our capacity is insufficient. We don't have enough people. And so we need to add more people with similar skill sets in order to keep the business growing. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is actually when we are so successful that we have new ideas and we want to develop new lines of business, new products, we want to refresh our existing offer. And in that case, sometimes we may identify that in order to build a new product, we really need to have people that need certain skill sets that we don't currently have. In that case, we are in a situation where our capability is lacking in-house. In-house, we mean inside the company, which means we need new skills added. So it's not more people knowing how to do the same thing. It's new people knowing to do things that we currently don't know how to do. That's the difference between capacity and capability. Yeah. Regardless of the situation, there's only one thing we can do, which is to request a new headcount. Headcount is corporate jargon for a new job opening or a new position. But you don't just go to your manager and say, hey, I need more people, can I hire people? There's a lot of considerations that go behind it. You need to make what is known as a business case. Basically, you need to justify, usually with data, with figures and numbers, why we need to add more people, how many more people we need, what's the impact that we're going to have in the company by having new people on board, what's the benefit that we're going to get by adding new employees. And the decision is not easy because there's budgets around this, there's money that needs to be considered. It's not only the salary. If this is an international company, we might need to pay for someone to move from one country to another if we cannot find the right person in that country. We might need to pay for some sort of orientation. That's usually depending on the company, but sometimes it can go up to 1 or 2 weeks of training. And sometimes that may involve traveling as well to another country. Benefits, stock options, taxes. There's a lot of considerations that go behind creating a new position or not. And if we get lucky to get that approved, then the position is created. Now, what happens when you have a new position created on your team? How do you find the right people for it? So that's where we get into the area of workforce planning. There's typically someone called a recruiter or someone from the recruiting team. That is the team tasked with finding people outside of the company to bring into the organization. And there's usually someone called the hiring manager. That is the manager that is looking for people to join their team. Sometimes those positions are open only internally, so you have to already be an employee of the company in order to apply. But in this time and age, really, companies are very interested in finding the right fit and the right person. So positions are mostly open both internally and externally. There's a selection process. So those people work together and they start asking a lot of questions in order to understand what we need for that job. For example, is this a generalist role that requires sort of like a broad skill set, or is this something very specialized? Do we need someone with, for example, a special qualification? Do we need an engineer? Do we need an economist? And is this position going to sit in a specific function, or is it going to be cross-functional? Is it going to be sitting on more than one team? Other considerations may be the level. Is this a manager level position? Is this an individual contributor position? Is this person going to be leading a business unit, or are they even going to be senior leadership worldwide? What are the main responsibilities and deliverables? By deliverable, we mean what they need to deliver, what work they need to produce. And where in the world will the position be based? Where, in what country geographically? Are we in a position to offer international relocation support? This may include visas, for example. That always makes the process a lot slower because you need to engage with governments. And most importantly, what's the skill set that the job requires? Is there a specific professional expertise or experience that the right candidates need to have? Specific studies or not? Any specific language background? More and more we see companies wanting people to be not just bilingual, but multilingual really, because they will need to operate across a series of markets. What will the compensation package look like? What will the interview process be like? How long will it last? How many people will be involved? Who will be sitting on the interview panel? And many, 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 many more questions. You can see, again, this is complex. It doesn't happen overnight. So once we look at that, we need to establish the right scope for the role, and we need to draft what is known as a JD in order to formalize the role. A JD is basically a job description, where it's basically a document where we specify what are the skill sets, the responsibilities, the activities, the qualifications, anything for a person who is interested in the position to know if they have chances to apply for the job or not. It also has other key information, sometimes the number of hours, depending on the market, if it's weekly hours by certain local regulations, what are the reporting lines. Sometimes you see, for example, 70% travel required. This means if you have a family, you may want to consider whether you are happy to be 70% of the month outside of your home. And then usually it's shared internally and externally in order to start to identify a pool of candidates that may be potentially a good fit for the role. Now, this is what a JD looks like. It's usually a lengthy document, but you see the largest part of it, it's the skill sets. And that's because the skills are the best type of predictors that we have in order to understand how people may perform in their jobs. Are they actually going to be the right person to deliver on those responsibilities? And remember, for those of you who think that tests will be over after school, you're very wrong, because anyone working for a company typically has some sort of evaluation, if not every 6 months, every 3 months, or every year, in order to assess how much of a contribution you're making to the business. Yeah. So if you don't like tests, you need to become friends with them. These are not tests as such, but this is a sort of like process in which your performance is reviewed in different ways. Yeah. I'm not going to get into assessments and appraisal tools, but you need to know that when you go into the workforce, people are still going to be looking at how much are you performing. Yeah. Similar to school. Now, how do we find the right candidates? We work with people known as sourcers and people known as recruiters. Basically, the sourcers go out and try to identify potential interesting candidates, and the recruiters go and contact them. That's what we call actually proactive prospecting. Or we can put up an ad and people may reactively apply. So we may be accepting applications from people, but we may also want to go, and I know some of you use the word headhunting. Basically, candidate prospecting is that, only that we use the word headhunting usually when it's a very senior position, someone with a lot of experience. Yeah, but it's basically the same thing. And this follows the laws of economics, for those of you who are going to go into that field. There's a certain number of people in the world that know how to do a job, and a certain positions open. And sometimes it's easier to find people, sometimes it's really difficult. And that's why companies cast their net wide across the world. There's a few tools like Glassdoor and LinkedIn where people usually, I don't know if people use Facebook anymore, but basically it's a sort of Facebook, two sorts of Facebooks for the professional world where people open their profiles. This is what they look like. Companies can post openings when they're looking for people, and that's how the connection happens. And that's the way we get a recruitment process kickstarted. Now, we know through these tools such as Glassdoor and LinkedIn that the world of work is shifting. It was shifting before COVID. It's now probably, this change has been accelerated. But one of the trends that we know is that technology has been pervading workspaces for a long time. Now, this doesn't mean that people are going to get out of jobs. Yes, there is a trend towards automation. So meaning that most jobs need to start interacting with machines. It doesn't mean that we no longer need people. It just means that we need people with additional skill sets. We need people that are able to work with machines. Yeah. That's information from the World Economic Forum. There's a lot of sources of data you can look at. But basically, one of the important things is that skills are inherently human. So we know that in their lifetime, a person will have several jobs and or career paths. I mean, I spoke about myself. I started off in a field, moved on to another, moved on to another. That's very common. Along the way, that person will be picking up different value creating skills that companies are interested in. And there are certain skills that machines are unable to develop, or at least for now and for the foreseeable future. And some of those abilities might be job specific, but many abilities will actually be what we call transferable skills. It means You may learn to do something in a job, but then you can bring it over in different ways in order to be successful in a job that you've never had to do in the past before. I think, what do you call them in Spanish? Habilidades transversales, I think they're called in Spanish.
Okay.
All right, so there's a number of reports that you can look at if you want to look at the future of work. What I've done is I've selected one which I think is quite clear for you, looking at what are the different professional clusters or groups that are emerging today. What are companies most interested in? They're looking at the field of data and artificial intelligence, and they're looking at engineering and cloud computing on the one hand. So here you have some positions that might resonate with some of you: cybersecurity experts, data scientists, app developers, for those of you who are more interested on the technical side of things. We can look at product development and sales, marketing, and content. So anything from digital marketers to customer success specialists, localization managers, those of you who are interested in translation, for example. We have what is known as the care economy and green economy. So renewable energy experts, waste management specialists, childcare providers, elderly care social workers. So you see, there's a lot of variety in there. And it doesn't mean that if you're not on this list, you're never gonna get a job. It means these are the jobs that seem to be on the rise in the 2020s. And then you have some job families around people and culture, HR, so human resource business partners, compensation specialists, instructional designers, sourcers, recruiters, diversity and inclusion. You get the idea. So you have a lot to choose from, guys, as you start thinking about your future professional career. But what we know is that successful professionals in the future will increasingly require both digital and human competence. So it's a mix of both. Now, you may be wondering, and this is probably the most important bit of the most juicy bit of the presentations, what are the top skills our organizations are looking for? So we can divide them into three big buckets, if you will, or three big groups. The first one is the technical skills, which are more specific. They are specialized to certain job abilities, and they require specific domain training, sometimes some sort of professional certification, certain advanced cognitive skills. I'm thinking engineering, I'm thinking accounting, I'm thinking digital marketing, I'm thinking psychology, for example. So those are very job specific, very geared towards certain areas. The second one is what we know as business skills, which are skills that usually work regardless of the team that you're sitting in. Data-driven orientation is a big one. When you make decisions, you cannot make decisions based on your intuition or because you like it or because you think it's the right thing. You actually need to prove through numbers that your decision is the best decision for the business. Otherwise, it will not be taken into consideration. And I know that most of you are working in subjects where your teachers ask you to, like specify why and how does this connect with data. Don't disregard this, because if there's one skill set that's really important these days, it's being data-driven. If you're not data-driven, you cannot make a business case. If you cannot make a business case, you can achieve very little within an organization. Then once you have the data, you need to analyze it. You need to be able to analyze it, to produce graphs, to communicate it in very clear ways. Remember, time is money. People will not offer you a lot of their times because they're really busy. So if you have 1 minute, you need to make the most impact in that minute. I guess some of you English teachers, you probably work with elevator pitches, helping people create, impactful, punchy lines that are short in nature. So that's about analytical skills, critical thinking skills, being able to analyze complex situations and then try to find solutions based on that really deep critical analysis of reality. That's a big one. Another one is what we call growth mindset, is really having this attitude to always be wanting to learn and always be very interested in developing your skills. That Sometimes we see people in the corporate world that have a lot of qualifications, but they lack in energy and they lack in drive. And that's something that sooner or later catches them. Presentation skills, you will be having to stand up and speak in front of people in your language, in another language, with slides, without slides, having had the chance to prepare, or literally your manager calling you saying, hey, I have an emergency, you need to go and you need to persuade those directors to invest in whatever project we have. So presentation skills is a big one. Customer centricity, we want to make sure that we are polite, that we're always trying to help either external customers or internal customers in the company. Project management, you're going to be managing lots of very complex projects involving lots of people and lots of different milestones along the way. Creativity and innovation, that's where the source of value for companies mostly resides. Because we have a very competitive landscape, we always need to create new things and we need to offer new products and services that people will find of value.
Probably this is the best time to show this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The pandemic.
During the pandemic. And then being very autonomous and proactive, not sitting around there to be told what to do. You want to show that you have autonomy in order to get things done. And of course, adaptability and prioritization. Things change all the time. You may need to change your plan, and you may need to change tack all the time. So you need to feel comfortable with that and operating in sort of like in an uncertain environment.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, interpersonal skills. These are huge. I've seen many people fail on the interpersonal front. They may be great with numbers, or they may be great in their jobs, but they're not empathetic communicators. If you cannot communicate things in a way that people connect with, you're probably doomed for failure. Relationship building, collaboration and teamwork. You're gonna be working on teamworks all the time. You're seldom gonna be someone running one project on your own unless the project is very small. You need to be open to feedback. People will give you feedback all the time. I loved what you did, or you know what, I think you need to change this because it's not working. You need to be comfortable with that. Conflict resolution, when people give feedback, there's always the potential for things to go bust and explode in people's faces. So conflict resolution is also an important skill to have. Managing stakeholders, and by stakeholder, I mean people that work with you. That's the concept of a stakeholder, people that have a stake or an interest in the projects you're working in. People management, if you're going to be a manager. Leadership and charisma, if you're going to be a leader. Language mastery is an absolute must. Most international companies operate either in English, some in French, some in other languages. And intercultural awareness. You're going to be working all the time with people from different cultural backgrounds who may have different understandings of the world. And it's very important to communicate your views in ways that are not going to go counter to other people's sense of politeness, for example. So how can you develop all these competencies and skills? So all around self-motivation, really. You probably hear your teachers say that all the time. Teachers, I back you up. It's all about self-motivation. And just to wrap up, how can you leverage, how can you take advantage of your schooling to build your career? So we started talking about the links between business and academia. We talked about the growth mindset. You always need to be open to learning more. You don't need to wait for someone to go and teach it to you. You have the internet, you can go and research things yourself and learn new skills, usually for free. So one of the things you need to know is that companies will probably invest no more than 10% of your time in formal training. This should say formal, not informal, yeah? So you're going to go into formal training programs, very little of your time in a company. For the most part, you're going to spend probably around 20% informally learning with another colleague, asking questions. How do you do this? Can you help me with that? So it's mostly driven by yourself. And about 70%, you are going to be learning by actually doing the job. No one is going to be telling you how to do it. You're going to need to go and explore, get your hands dirty, waddle in the mud if necessary. this is what is known as the 70-20-10% model. There are different numbers. It may be 80-10-10 or whatever, but that's basically the idea. You need to provide for yourself in a way. Now, just to wrap up, how can you start developing as a professional? First of all, you need to view yourself already in high school, in secondary school, as a professional in training. That's what you are. You're training yourself to either open your own startup company or work for another company, yeah, or any other sort of organization, be it a hospital or whatever kind of organization you want to work in. You're going to be working in teams. You're going to be a professional of some sort. So start building your skills now.
Question: what happens, because it does happen that kids just don't know where they might end up. I mean, if you ask them, how do you picture yourself in 5 years' time? They just don't know.
Well, that's a good question. So as I said, you don't need to pick a specific line of work or career early on, but there are certain things like collaboration and communication and languages and, you know, curiosity to do research and investigate things that you can develop regardless of the field. They might be interested in, I don't know, literature.
A question that came here: entertainment, the world of entertainment.
Yeah.
How do you go about?
Well, there are companies that work around entertainment. Think of Netflix, for example. Yeah, so you can start exploring, like, what kind, do you like production? Do you like post-production? Do you like script writing? You know, what bit of the business are you most interested in? And then start developing those skills. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And don't miss the opportunity of your academic opportunity, of your academic chances. I've talked to your teachers. I've talked to Valeria, I've talked to Tamara, I've talked to Christian, I've talked to Analia, and they've shared with me lots of stuff that you guys are already working on that are directly related to those skills that you need to develop to be successful in the work. And last but not least, I think the jornadas that you had this week and probably last week, they are phenomenal because this is already an early investment in your professional development. If you look at them, each one of them connect directly to a certain area of the world of work. So life after lockdown, I cannot tell you how much time I spent working with offices around the world trying to build the return to office policies and the new normal.
The new normal, yeah.
You've had sessions around D&I, which is diversity and inclusion, or diversity, inclusion, and belonging. You had sessions around intercultural communication. You had something around TED Talks. It's all about presentation skills and capability building. And then you had this one about also building it, what we call a T-shaped workforce, which is basically it's employees in the shape of a T, because they have the breadth, but they also have the depth of knowledge in order to succeed in their jobs. So I hope that my goals were met. I know there was a lot of information, but we only have one opportunity to meet. Hopefully you found this useful. And remember, only you can drive your career forward. Start looking at yourself as a professional. And best of luck. Keep calm and show your talent. Open for questions now. Thank you very much for your attention.
No, thank you, Sergio.
You're very welcome.
Some of the students here are wondering, what happens or what's the purpose of when you have a job interview, when the interviewee is asked like strange or non-standard questions such as, I don't know, something weird. So what is the purpose or what skills are being tested indirectly with these kind of weird questions? Now I cannot think of any, but
yeah. For example,
maybe in general, one of them is, what about your weaknesses? In general, they ask you about this. What about your weaknesses? And then you don't know what to say. You start running for ideas that you don't know what to say after that.
These are two different types of questions. The first one, which could be something like, I don't know, you just landed, a completely unrelated question. You just landed a job as a politician, and you need to figure out how many wheels you need to get your country to produce in 3 months for the number of cars that your country has. and you have no idea how many cars there are in your country, who you need to talk to. So the purpose of those questions have to do with thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, lateral thinking.
So basically, people don't really care about the exact number you give them. You're probably not going to be able to give them a number. They want to look at your train of thought. How would you tackle that puzzle? How would you sort of like decompose it into smaller chunks so that then you can start attacking different bits of it? So what you need to do in those cases is you need to start taking them through your train of thought. You go like, well, if I need this information, this is where I would go and find it. If I need to talk to these people, this is the person I would contact. And then this is how I would create and manage the whole process. So that's what they want to understand. They don't really want you to tell them, oh, you need 5,000 wheels, because they don't know the answer either, right?
Well, that's why at school we try to train them into explaining their own trail of thought. I mean, okay, how did you come to this answer? Okay, and they have to speak out loud. And so they are putting in practice their own metacognitive skills, and they become aware of that. So sometimes I believe that kids think that secondary school is not that profitable for them, but I think that you have pointed out and shown how they are actually being trained. I
mean, you cannot build a strong professional career if you don't have a strong secondary school and primary school foundation. Literally, what you didn't learn in high school, you're not going to learn it at university. At university, they're going to assume that you've already learned it, and they're going to move on a lot faster than they're moving at school. So what you didn't learn in high school, you'll either need to learn it again on your own, or you need to ask someone again to explain it to you. But like you cannot leave gaps in between. Going to Christian's question. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Connecting with what to say when you are asked about your weaknesses.
Oh, your weaknesses, yes.
Sometimes I ask you that question.
To do with, self-awareness. And it has to do with part of when I mentioned the self-appraisal process is not only will you receive feedback from your manager, you will receive feedback from people on your team, your peers, you will receive feedback from other people in other teams that work with you. Sometimes you will receive feedback from clients if you work with clients. But most important, you need to evaluate yourself as well. And in order to do that, you need to be self-aware of what your strengths are, but also what are your areas for development? Where is there room for improvement? Yeah, so that's what they want to know.
Probably seeing and analyzing weaknesses as challenges more than failures.
Yeah, weakness is more in the sense of, all right, there are certain skills that I still don't fully master or that I haven't really had to develop in the past. So what are the areas? Because remember, every time you get an evaluation, it means we're telling you how well you've done your job, but we're also trying to identify your development plan for the next year. Yeah. How are you going to keep growing as a professional? So it has both looks. It's looking backwards in terms of how have you contributed to the business, but it's also looking forward in terms of like, okay, you're not going to keep doing the same thing all your life. How are you going to be stretching your own abilities, skill sets? Yeah.
Exactly. Sergio, it's almost time. I know that all of us know that you need to leave. Let me read a few comments from students. They love the presentation, extremely clear, amazing. Thank you very much for the talk. Thanks for your expertise, time, and enthusiasm. And probably, although there are many things that kids might not grasp right now, this is just for them. They need time for these words to sink in and probably the best of what they have from high school. Okay?
Exactly. This is just an initial introduction to the topic. I know different people are at different stages on their journey. We have people who are juniors. There are people who are sophomores. We have people about to graduate. So this will speak differently to each one of you guys. The good thing is, I think this is being recorded. You can go back and watch the presentation in the future. I expect many of the questions you have today to be answered by yourselves in the future when you look back and have had some experience in organizations. Some things are very abstract. You need to actually experience them in order to understand them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Very glad it was of help.
Thank you for your time.
Very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Yes, Annie?
Thanks, Sergio, for such a creative and enlightening talk. I'm sure our students will profit from it. Thanks, Tamara, Valeria, and Christian for hosting this talk. And having come to the end of our afternoon live talks, I'd like to say a special thank you to all the Boston College team, Laura for the graphic design, and Marina and Micaela for their full support. Thanks to our students and the rest of the audience for having participated so actively and sending such smart questions. We will meet tomorrow at 12:15 in the art closing session of our jornadas. Goodbye. Ivana?
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you
Thank
to the
you.
language team, and thank you, Sergio, for spending this priceless hour with us and sharing your thoughts and expertise, as the comment said. Thanks, everyone, for watching us live. As Analia said, this concludes our afternoon sessions, and we look forward to meeting you tomorrow at 12:15 to close our jornadas and to happily start our winter holidays. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.